Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler. I'm the host and I'm founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. I want to welcome you here. I want to welcome you back. Really honored that you're here with us. Guys, it's my goal to build a resource, an advocacy, a brotherhood, camaraderie, whatever you want to call it, the order, if you will, fraternity, where men can band together and learn from each other, grow from each other, and improve in every facet of our lives, from our homes and our businesses to the communities in which we serve. It's evident to me that masculinity and manliness is needed more now than ever. So to that end, we're doing this podcast and we're really working to give you the tools and resources and conversations that you need. So this is your Friday Field Notes. In the Friday Field Notes, I discuss some ideas and some thoughts that have been bouncing around in my brain and some things that I've been thinking about over the past week or so. Now, we had a conversation or a question on our Ask Me Anything, which is a podcast that we release every Wednesday. And somebody was asking about the idea of capitalism and manliness and whether or not they are synonymous, whether or not they're intertwined. And I've got some thoughts about this because I wanted to expand on it a little deeper. So before we get into that, I do want to discuss with you one thing that you can do to support the show, and that is to pick up any Order of Man swag that you may see that you like. So I've got our legacy shirt. I don't think this one's actually in the store, but we do have our Order of Man hat, and we have two new brand new shirts out. Number one is King Card. It's literally the king with the Order of Man axes, and it says protect, provide, preside. And the second one that we have is Hoist the Black Flag. I'm not going to ruin that one for you. Just go to store.orderofman.com. You can pick up a shirt. You can pick up a hat. You can pick up our best-selling battle planner. It's a great way to support what we're doing, but also have some utility in the process. So with that said, guys, really what I want to do today is I want to get to the reasons I believe that capitalism and manliness are connected. And I'll start by saying this is that, number one, if you look at socialism, you look at communism, those things are not manly. All right. If you look at both of those, it's about taking from one party or one person and giving to another who is less deserving. It always produces an inferior result. There is no time throughout history where any system or any country that has been dictated through market ideas of capitalism and socialism that it's actually worked out and been more advantageous than capitalism. Capitalism is quite literally a social construct. A lot of people talk about gender or masculinity or femininity as being socially constructed. They aren't, okay? They're biologically constructed, and then they're supported societally. And they're supported societally for good reason. They actually work. And it isn't until the relative ease of modernity within the past 30, 40, 50 years that we've even had the luxury of calling into question what makes a man, what makes a woman. And so these are first world problems. But if we don't address them and talk about them realistically, they will become more severe problems that at some point down the road, we're going to need to address. So what I wanted to talk with you about today is the idea of capitalism, what it means at its foundation, what it means at its root, and why it's so important that we as men embrace the idea of free markets and capitalism, and how this system has produced more wealth, more prosperity, more abundance, more medical advancements, more technological advancements than any other system in history, and why we as men ought to be champions of the idea of capitalism. Now, I'm going to start by saying that there are some faults with capitalism in that people can take advantage of the system, right? We have greed and we have corruption like crony capitalism that gets in the way of us being able to trade freely. But let me say this very clearly. That isn't capitalism. Crony capitalism is a misnomer. It's an oxymoron. You cannot have crony capitalism. Now, I know that's the term we use and words are important, so it illustrates a point, but the whole concept that because people are manipulating the system or using their government positions to dictate and to narrate and to manipulate the free market, that is the antithesis of capitalism. Capitalism at its core is about free markets. It's about voluntary exchange. It's about me having a good or a product or a service or an idea and then going out into the marketplace and voluntarily exchanging that with you. Crony capitalism is not by any stretch of the imagination that. When people are greedy and they manipulate people or they lie to people or they abuse the system, that is not capitalism. So I'm not here to tell you that capitalism is perfect. In many ways, it can be exploited, but capitalism at its core is a very manly thing. And I'm going to explain 4 reasons that is. But please don't ever believe that just because the system can be exploited or manipulated, that somehow it's not as advantageous as these other systems. We want prosperity. We want growth. We want independence. We want free thoughts and exchange of ideas. We want people to be able to make their own decisions. So let's break this down. Number 1, the reason why capitalism and manliness go hand in hand is it promotes the idea of rights and responsibilities. Okay, everybody is familiar with, at least if you live in this country, and even if you don't, you're familiar with the idea that there are certain God-given, unalienable rights that we have. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And there isn't a single person that should be able to dictate to us how we live our lives, how we lead our lives, how we communicate, the products and goods and services that we offer, what we find valuable. And that's a very manly idea that you have a right to these things. But in addition to that, and here's what most people overlook, is you also have a responsibility. I think it was Peter Parker's or Spider-Man's uncle who said, so Stan Lee essentially said that with great power comes great responsibility. So the freedom that we enjoy as Americans is very, very powerful. Like I already said, it created more freedom, more prosperity, more abundance, more technological advancement than any other time in history. That's a very powerful idea. But we also have a responsibility. And everybody wants to talk about rights. I have a right to do this. I have a right to do that. And maybe you do, but that right needs to be defended from time to time. And it might actually cost you your life to defend those rights. And that's the responsibility that we have. If there's one core fundamental of masculinity, it's that, or manliness, it's that we have a responsibility. Now, it's on my hat: protect, provide, preside, right? We talk about this often. Protect, provide, preside is responsibility. We need to make ourselves capable of defending ourselves, defending other people, standing up for people who can't do it themselves, providing for our families and our communities and our neighbors and our neighborhood. And then, excuse me, being able to live the life that we want through our own actions. But you can't have rights without responsibilities. And responsibilities, conversely, always lead to more rights. Because it's very, very important we understand the connection between rights and responsibilities and why we as men cannot just rest on our laurels or cannot just live on the backs of our forefathers, but realize that we at some point may need to fight to defend and preserve the rights that God has given us. Number 2 is that capitalism promotes innovation. If there is no incentive, and this is what socialism does, this is what communism does, is it disincentivizes you for producing. Because what happens if you produce? You get taken from, right? If you learn to produce more than the other person, it gets taken from you and given to somebody else. There was a famous research or a study, and maybe it's just anecdotal, but it talks about a teacher who decides that they're going to implement socialism or communism into their classroom. And rather than basing kids' performance on their own merit and worth and study habits, or intelligence, they're going to base it on just making sure that everybody averages out and equals out the grade. So about the first time they did a test, the students who got A's, they looked at their scores and they were a little bit disheartened because they saw that, well, instead of an A, and I worked my tail off to get this A, I actually got a B because the kids who didn't do anything got D's or F's, and that rounded out the score and propped those D's and F's up. So they were happy about it. But the A's and B's were ticked off, rightfully so. So the next time they took their test, the kids who would normally get A's and B's got B's and C's because they thought to themselves, well, why work hard when it's just going to be taken from me? The D's and the F's got maybe C's and D's. The third time they take the test, the kids who got A's and B's and C's got C's and D's, and the kids who got D's and F's got D's and C's, right? So when you compromise and you don't incentivize people properly for production, you end up diminishing the results you could have otherwise experienced. Now, here's the problem. Some people will say, well, what about those kids who have D's and F's? They'll get left behind. They might, but the A's and the B's, if you allow them to be A's and B's and produce and give them an incentive structure for performing, then they're going to go out and they're going to help the D's and F's who can't possibly do it for themselves. This is the beauty of capitalism. A lot of people say, well, capitalism is greedy. Not necessarily. I don't consider myself a greedy individual. Now, I believe in the incentive structure, and I want to continue to add value to your life so that when there's opportunities for me to serve, I can take advantage of it. I've been thinking about coaching my oldest son's football team, at least helping out in some capacity. I would like to give back to the community. I would like to serve in the community. I would like to donate to politicians who I believe in. I would like to donate to causes that are important to me. I need money to do that. And so this concept of innovation, creating new ideas and concepts and merging different thoughts and different ideas and different sectors of the market together to create something that has never been created before, and to reduce costs and to create solutions to problems that we've always been dealing with, is a byproduct of free markets, of a capitalistic society, and something that I believe is very manly. Let's get to the third point. The third point is that there's this concept of merit, right? I know we live in this participation society. I know that you believe that showing up is half the battle. Maybe you don't believe that, but a lot of people do. I know we believe that we don't want people to feel bad, and I certainly don't want people to feel bad either. But the reality is that some people haven't earned the results that they're experiencing. And if I want to incentivize people to earn results, then I need to make sure there's a reward system in place to incentivize, to promote exceptionalism, not at the expense of other people. This is what so many people get wrong. Capitalism is not at the expense of other people. Let me tell you why. If we want to do business together, let's say, because I talked about our Order of Man store earlier, let's say you wanted this hat, this very specific hat that I'm wearing right now. And I think this hat sells for 22 or 25 bucks. And you go to store.orderofman.com and you jump on and you find this hat and you're like, okay, there's that hat's $25. Two things need to exist simultaneously. Number one, I need to believe that your $25 is worth more than the hat that I paid for. And that's usually true because I paid maybe $10, $12, $13, $15 to have the hat created. You pay me $25, I make $10. So that's the first condition that needs to exist. The second condition that needs to exist in order for this to take place is you need to believe that this hat is more valuable than the $25 that you're going to give to me, right? You think that it's going to help you look good, or it's going to spread a message, or maybe you just want to support, or whatever your reason is, you believe that the hat is worth more than $25. If both of those conditions did not exist, a transaction would not take place. This is all voluntary. It's very interesting. How can that exist? How can that be? How can it be that I think your money is worth more than the hat, and you think the hat is worth more than the money you're going to give me? Value is subjective. It's as simple as that. And we're all grown men who can make decisions based on what we think is important. And what I think is important is not necessarily what you think is important, and what you believe is important may not be as important to me. But the whole idea is that we're building ourselves up and we're serving others based on merit. Now, who gets to decide that? Well, the consumer does. Now, we should always have a high sense of worth, right? But at the end of the day, you as consumers need to decide that what I'm putting out into the world is valuable. You as a consumer of vehicles, for example, if you're in the market for a new truck, gets to decide what is valuable. The GMC dealership, the Toyota dealership, the Dodge, the Chevy the Ford dealership, they don't get to decide what's valuable. You do. Collectively, we as 300 plus million people in this country, 7 plus billion, maybe even close to 8 billion people, get to decide what's valuable. And what that does is that drives merit, that causes us to do better, to be more competitive, to be more efficient, to do things right, to hire the right people, to be innovative, to have a healthy sense of competition with other people. These drive down costs, these build up innovation, and ultimately gives us responsibility to live our own lives. Now, guys, the last point that I wanted to make with you, and this is very important, is that the idea of capitalism and being manly is that it promotes personal ownership, personal property, that we have a right to the property that we own. The government doesn't own it. Another party doesn't own it. Another business doesn't own it. Another individual doesn't own it, but I own it. And isn't that an amazing thing? That I own my computer, that I own my intellectual property, that I own these cameras, that I own the website, that I own the clothes that I have on my back, that I own this desk, that I own this house. Like, isn't that an amazing thing? Again, this comes back to the incentive structures. It's so crucial that we as individuals have rights to personal property. If somebody else has those rights, are we really free? Are we really free to do what we want? Are we really free to utilize my camera, my computer, my microphones, my clothes, my intellectual property in a way that I think will serve people? No, of course not. We're indentured. We're slaves. Unfortunately, this is true when it comes to, for example, property rights. We think we live in a free market society, and in some ways we do, and in some ways we don't. I pay taxes on this property every year. Well, do I own it or not? Well, the answer is no, I don't. It might be written that way on paper, but if I'm having to pay somebody else, in this case, the government, every single year because I own land, is that really ownership? I mean, we're really shifting far away from this idea of personal property and individual rights and ownership rights that we have. It's a real travesty. Now, guys, I'm going to close out with this, and then we'll recap, is that there are some pitfalls potentially of this idea of capitalism. Essentially, you're letting people go out into the world and you're assuming that what they're going to do is right and just and noble and true. But there's always going to be people who manipulate the system, who take advantage of the system, who mess with the system. But again, that isn't capitalism. That's an abuse of the system that's available. And you're always going to see that. Some people say, well, we need this third party, this arbitrator to come in and this moderator to be able to ensure that people are doing right. Well, everybody is flawed. You're flawed. I'm flawed. Government elected officials are flawed. And so why do you think that that individual is going to be less flawed than you? People will say, well, capitalism gets taken advantage of. Yes, agreed. So does socialism. So does capitalism. Or excuse me, so does communism. Okay. And those systems have literally killed more people than any other system of trade and governance and free markets and economies out there at all. Are there their downfalls? Sure, people can manipulate the system, but that doesn't go away just because capitalism goes away. In fact, all you're doing is you're consolidating power for a few at the expense of the many. I'd rather 300 million, if we're talking about this country, or almost 8 billion people, if we're talking about the world, collectively decide what I am worth, what you are worth. I'm not talking about worth as a human or your self-worth. I'm talking about worth of the goods and the products and services that you offer. Should there be checks and balances in place? Absolutely. I want to ensure that every human being has a level playing field. And I want to ensure that the reins are taken off of us so that we can go out and we can innovate and we can be creative and we can think of new things and we can see things in a different light and we can bring them to market. And the market will say that's a good idea, or the market will say that's a bad idea. And if it's a good idea, we double down on it. We invest more in it. We get better at it. If it's a bad idea, we nix it. We go back to the drawing board. We fix, we manipulate, we change, we tweak, we adjust, and then we introduce something to the market that's going to serve people more effectively. Guys, capitalism is the most manly system of governance and trade that's ever been created. It has opportunities for exploitation, but that doesn't mean it's a bad system in and of itself. You cannot show me a better system that's created more wealth, more abundance, more individualism, more freedom, more prosperity, more medical advancements, more technological advancements than what capitalism has done. And if you don't believe that, then I got to admit that you're either ignorant or an idiot. Now, I know some of you guys might say that's harsh. It isn't harsh. You either don't know what's happened throughout culture and societies when we start to implement socialism and communism, or you just are oblivious to it, which makes you kind of ridiculous. Guys, capitalism, this is what we need. Now, we don't want people to abuse it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying I want people to exploit others. What I'm saying is that I want you to create products and goods and services and value into the marketplace, and other people to create value, add goods and products and services into the marketplace. So ultimately, we can create the most prosperous, the most abundant, the most healthy, the most free society that we can possibly create. So again, as a recap, and then we'll close things down. Number one, capitalism promotes rights and responsibilities. They're connected. Number two, it promotes innovation through competition and drives down prices. Number three, it's a meritocracy. It's based on what you do and how you perform, not anything else. And by the way, if you are promoted through any other form other than meritocracy, let's say nepotism, for example, well, that's not capitalism. Okay. Some of you guys will say, well, you know, people get promoted that don't deserve to be promoted. That's not capitalism. That might be nepotism or playing favorites or politics, but it's not capitalism. And then the last thing is individual property rights. I hope that helps. I hope that serves you. If you guys agree, share. If you don't agree, let me know what you don't agree with, and we can hash it out. Very important we have these discussions. Yeah, what more can I say? I feel like I addressed that pretty well. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts, whatever, future topics, let me know. We'll keep putting this content out there. You guys keep sharing, you keep following, and we'll keep doing what we need to do. Now, remember, guys, if you want to support, and on the topic of capitalism, what we're doing here, go to store.orderofman.com, pick up our King Card shirt or our Hoist the Black Flag shirt, pick up a hat, pick up another shirt, pick up a decal or patches, or our #1 best-selling battle planner to help you get your things on track. All right, guys, we'll be back next week for an interview. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.